Hey guys, how you all doing? BionicleSaurus here, back with another dinosaur model review, and in this video we will be taking a look at the Safari Limited Pachyrhinosaurus. Of the 4 recent ceratopsians for Safari Limited's Wild Safari Dinos line, the Vagaceratops, Diabloceratops, and the new Nasutoceratops, and of course this Pachyrhinosaur, the Pachyrhinosaurus seems to get talked about the least. So that's why I decided to do a review on it. It seemed a slight bit more obscure. For those who do not know my method of reviewing, I go by a rating system from F to A based on 3 fundamental attributes: overall appearance, detail, and paleontological accuracy. So without further ado, let's get into this review. So starting out with overall appearance, this figure doesn't exactly make a huge impact. When you first glance at it, it does have fairly dull colors and a fairly bland-looking pose and overall look. Safari certainly could have done more speculative, more flamboyant things, perhaps quills down the back, or making its horns a different color, or making his frill colorful. There definitely could have been many opportunities on this figure to make it more flashy, but honestly, I don't think it was exactly necessary. This figure looks very good nonetheless, despite its slightly bland look. The pose and the overall sculpt is very, very good. It looks naturalistic. It's in a very standard kind of walking pose. There's nothing particularly amazing about it. Nothing eye-catching. He's not charging. He's not only on 3 feet or anything like that. He's just walking, but it does look very believable, very natural. Another big pro is the paint job. Now, I know I was just somewhat saying that it was dull, and it is. It is very dull, very natural, very conservative. But nonetheless, I really like it, because one thing that Safari Limited seems to have trouble with is making just browns and grays and whatnot look really good, and they succeeded on this figure with that. There are several different shades of tans and browns all intermingling across the figure's paint job. And they look really good. Nothing looks like it was just slopped on. Nothing is obviously put on with a paintbrush. It looks very good, almost Papo level quality in that sense. And that's something that Papo really does a good job of, is making the conservative colors look really good and natural. And normally Safari often has trouble with that. They look just very plain, or there aren't enough shades of them. But they did a really good job on this figure. So, for overall appearance, I'm going to give this figure an A-. On the whole, it's not an eye-catching model by any means. You aren't gonna immediately see it on a shelf full of other Wild Safari figures and really notice it apart from the rest. But it looks really naturalistic. It's in a good pose, and while nothing's flashy, it's certainly not boring. It's just a little bit dull, very conservative. But still, they did a really good job, and the paint scheme is very well executed for what it is. And so it definitely deserves at least an A-. In fact, I probably could have been more generous with that. Alright, let's talk a little bit about this model's detail. Starting out with the skin texture. This is the most important element of detail and sculpting on any figure. If you just give them a smooth skin texture or a bunch of ugly big wrinkles, it's not going to work. But this guy does certainly not have either of those. Safari Limited really has been stepping up their game recently when it comes to scalation. They have been putting in tons of amazing detail of just absolutely hundreds, probably thousands on any given figure, of tiny, amazingly meticulously sculpted scales. Almost similar to a Papo figure, which is really quite amazing. Looking at this guy, the texture of the skin looks so realistic. All the tiny scales, and they are supplemented with occasional larger scoots throughout the skin texture. Looks really, really good. Another good point of detail on this figure is its head. Every little horn and spike and scoot is meticulously sculpted and painted. However, there is one tiny quality control error on mine's head. I haven't seen it on anyone else's figure, but nonetheless, it's something worth mentioning, and it's something to think about if you're wondering whether or not to get this. If you'll notice, right in front of the boss, there are 3 small horns right above the beak. On this side, they are painted the tan that they are supposed to be. On the other side, they are left the same shade of brown that the rest of the head is painted with. A slight quality control oversight, and like I said, I haven't seen it on anyone else's figure of the Pachyrhino, and so it probably is just mine, but nonetheless, it's something to think about that this figure might have some quality control issues in general. But once again, very small issue, certainly doesn't take away from the detail or paint of this figure, at least not too much. Putting that aside though, getting back to the head, beautifully painted eyes. They are kind of a light orangish reddish color, if you can see that. You probably can't very well, but nonetheless, they're wonderfully painted, have a nice gloss to them, looks very real, looks very genuine. And, yes, all the other detail that is supposed to be sculpted and painted well on the head is, besides that one error I just talked about, all the both the ear holes are painted a nice shade of pink inside of them. Same with the nostril, same with the mouth. The whole thing is really well done. So, overall for detail, I'm going to give this figure an A. If it weren't for that one little quality control issue, he would have an A+, because look at this skin texture. Like I've already said, it's absolutely stunning. Not a scale is missed, not a horn is missed, not a scoot, not a toenail or a claw, or I was about to say tooth, but yeah, all teeth have been missed. Not a big deal, they would be way inside the mouth and almost invisible anyway. I wouldn't expect that on any ceratopsian model. But yeah, overall this figure is wonderfully detailed, the paint is great, and the sculpt is exceptional. Moving on to scientific accuracy. Safari Limited always markets their figures as educational for children, and so paleontological accuracy is incredibly important for all of their prehistoric animal reconstructions. And let me tell you, this figure truly delivers in accuracy. There is almost nothing to complain about. First of all, let's talk about the orientation of all the spikes and horns on his head. Nothing at all to complain about. Everything is perfectly accurate to the actual Pachyrhinosaurus skull specimens that we have. The one thing you could potentially complain about is the boss being depicted as no more than a lump of bone, as some people prefer the theory that it is actually the base of a large horn. But for the most part, that theory is far less likely than it simply being a large lump, and so to me that's not really an inaccuracy at all. Honestly, there is virtually nothing that in any way strays away from the actual skeletons, specimens that we have for this genus. I mean, it's basically perfect. The one thing that I may say is a little bit off is the proportion between the length of the limbs and the torso. It seems to me that the legs, especially the rear ones, are a slight bit long and the torso is a little bit too short this way. Like, it needs to be more elongated and the legs need to be less tall. Other than that though, this figure is literally scientifically perfect. And even that probably is basically correct. The proportions aren't that off. It's certainly not as bad as, say, the hips of the Carcharodontosaurus, which we discussed in the last review. So, for paleontological and scientific accuracy, this figure gets an A+. Now, undeniably there are things that you could potentially complain about, but there are no axiomatic inaccuracies on this replica to speak of. So now, boys and girls, ladies and gents, it is time to tell you all what I view as the final overall rating for this figure. And this model receives an A+. Look at this. The overall appearance, while slightly conservative and maybe boring to some people, is naturalistic and believable. The detail is absolutely astonishing, especially for a Safari Limited figure, and the accuracy is flawless. Safari Limited has truly made a beautiful, a wonderful ceratopsian figure. Their Pachyrhinosaurus is absolutely awesome. BionicleSaurus signing out.